Arcfieldweather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Monday morning, April 24th. We are approaching the end of the month of April, and I thought this would be a good time to talk about the 2023 tropical season. We'll look at summertime conditions as well across the nation. First and foremost, whenever I like to take a look at a long-range weather forecast, I focus in on sea surface temperature anomalies around the globe, and we'll certainly highlight that over the next several minutes in this video discussion. There are really two opposing signals coming with respect to the tropical season. One, the development of El Nino in the tropical part of the Pacific Ocean. That is a warmer than normal sea surface temperature pattern, normally unfavorable for Atlantic Basin tropical activity. However, on the other hand, the Atlantic Basin itself has a large area of above normal sea surface temperatures. That, of course, is a favorable signal for tropical activity. So the end result, I'm leaning towards somewhere in the middle, probably a relatively normal type of tropical season for the Atlantic Basin. Let's summarize it right up front here in the executive summary. This, by the way, all of these plots and numbers and graphics I'll show during this video discussion are right there in the posting currently on the homepage of the Arcfieldweather.com website, the tropical outlook for 2023. Again, kind of a normal end result here of two opposing signals with respect to sea surface temperature anomalies across the globe. And normal in the Atlantic Basin is roughly 13 or 14 named storm systems. Maybe 6 or 7 of those attain hurricane status, and maybe 2 or 3 of those reach major hurricane status. That's category 3 or higher on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale. El Nino looks like it will develop over the next several weeks and intensify during the summer season. We have had back-to-back-to-back La Nina years. That is about to finally come to an end. It looks like warmer than normal sea surface temperatures already showing up in dramatic fashion right along the west coast of South America. We'll look at that in a moment. And there's all kinds of indications that warmer than normal condition near the coast of South America will tend to spread to the west along the equator over the next several weeks. Again, El Nino generally is unfavorable for tropical activity in the Atlantic Basin. It generally leads to higher wind shear in the Atlantic Basin, which tends to be a negative factor for the intensification or even the development of tropical activity in the Atlantic Basin. But on the other hand, we'll see this in a moment also, the Atlantic Basin, all the way from the Gulf of Mexico to the west coast of Africa, features a lot of above normal, warmer than normal sea surface temperatures, and that, of course, is generally favorable for tropical activity. We'll also see that temperatures right along the East Coast, quite a bit above normal. That is certainly concerning. That leaves the U.S. East Coast vulnerable for a hurricane hit later this summer or going into the fall season, something we'll have to, of course, closely monitor. And it could be what I call a homegrown type of storm system that just develops out in the western part of the Atlantic Ocean rather than all the way off the west coast of Africa. Also, Gulf of Mexico, much warmer than normal water temperatures right now, and that could lead to an early season, maybe during the month of May, development of a tropical system, a named tropical system over the Gulf of Mexico, something we will also monitor closely over the next few weeks. Well, let's now take a look at the very latest sea surface temperature anomalies around the globe, and we'll highlight the areas of interest with respect to the tropical outlook and the summertime outlook for 2023. First of all, this line right here represents the equator. It is the 0-degree latitude, and right here, look at this intense, warmer than normal water temperatures here off the west coast of South America. This is quite a change from several months ago. Again, we have had back-to-back-to-back La Nina years here with colder than normal water temperatures off the west coast of South America over the tropical part, the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean. That has changed dramatically in recent weeks off the west coast of South America. And there certainly are signs here, and we'll look in a moment here, that this will tend to spread right in this region right here. And by, let's say, June or July, we'll see this entire area at pretty significantly above normal with regard to sea surface temperatures. That is your El Nino developing right now, really noticeable just off the immediate west coast of South America, but it will increase in intensity and spread westward along the equator here over the next several weeks, leading into El Nino conditions for the summer. And by the way, likely lasting all the way into the fall and winter season of 2023-2024. Now, let's kind of clear the page here and point out a couple other areas of interest. First of all, in the Atlantic Basin, warmer than normal conditions right here off the west coast of Africa. This is critically important because that is where a lot of tropical waves develop, especially in the first half of the tropical season. Waves come off the west coast of Africa, and this will certainly be a favorable factor for the intensification of any tropical waves that form over Africa and then move to the west in the riding along with the trade winds here into the breeding grounds of the Atlantic Ocean. Notice also a lot of warmer than normal conditions in the Gulf of Mexico, in the northern Caribbean Sea, right in this region right here. This is why I think there could be an early season development. The official starting time, and this is just a man-made official starting time of June 1st for the Atlantic Basin tropical season. There certainly can be activity during the month of May, and look specifically over the Gulf of Mexico where temperatures are well above normal in the water of the Gulf of Mexico. Also, mention up front the kind of the concern about the East Coast. Look at this right here, the very warm conditions pocket right off the East Coast of the U.S., and that certainly leads to a higher vulnerability for a tropical hit along the East Coast during the summer or perhaps later on into the fall season. So those are the areas of interest with respect to sea surface temperature anomalies. El Nino forming in the tropical, the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean, and a lot of warmer than normal water right now throughout the Atlantic Basin. Well, let's take a look at kind of an interesting looping plot here of the sea surface temperature anomalies. This is kind of a 3D look. What we're looking at here, the surface level of the Pacific Ocean lies right along this line right here, and this is way down 300 meters below the surface. And this is an evolution from February into the early part of April. And you see right near the surface a big change from colder than normal conditions to warmer than normal conditions. And that reflects what we just saw on that still image of the current temperature anomalies here. So a lot of warmer than normal water has kind of bubbled up to the surface just off the west coast of South America, which sits right here. Just to the west there, as you go farther to the west here, under the equator, literally underneath the equator here, underneath the surface, along the 0-degree latitude, you see a lot of warmer than normal water, and that will certainly looks like it'll rise up to the surface. And this intense warmer than normal conditions seen right now only off the immediate west coast of South America looks like we'll see it spreading to the what appears to be spreading to the west here across the equator over the next couple of months or so. A lot of warmer than normal water just beneath the surface throughout the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean. And here is a strong signal for El Nino conditions later on in the spring and certainly this summer. And again, it looks like it'll last into the fall and winter. Well, those actual sea surface temperature changes and beneath the surface water temperature changes over the last couple of months. One signal that El Nino is coming, another signal points to all these computer forecast models. This is a compilation of many computer forecast models, what we call dynamical models, which rely on current conditions, and statistical models, which rely more on statistics. Both point to the advent of El Nino conditions in the tropical part of the Pacific Ocean. These are some of the latest computer forecast models, and what we're looking at are rolling 3-month averages here. And this is, for example, June, July, and August, and anything above this zero line right here represents El Nino conditions as outlined right here. Anything below, La Nina conditions. The farther above that neutral line, the stronger the El Nino. And the red here represents the average of the, again, what we call the dynamical computer forecast models. Rolling 3-month averages going forward, moving from relatively close to neutral conditions right now into El Nino territory by the time we get to the summer. And again, this is the June, July, August time period right here. And it looks like El Nino can last not only through the fall season, but right into the winter, December, January, and February. So that will be quite a different winter season with El Nino conditions in the tropical Pacific Ocean as compared with the last 3 where we had those back-to-back-to-back La Nina winter seasons. The green here represents the average of the statistical models. They also suggest El Nino conditions, perhaps not quite as strong as the dynamical models, but nonetheless, almost universal agreement here amongst all of these computer forecast models for El Nino to develop and intensify over the next few months, becoming a major factor for the 2023 tropical season. Well, in addition to the tropical activity that we're discussing here, I'd like to take a look at just the average temperature and precipitation type patterns associated with El Nino in a summer season. These particular maps come from bamweather.com, and right here we're looking at the temperature anomalies, the climatological temperature anomalies in an El Nino type of summer season. A lot of cooler than normal conditions across the central and northern plains, the Midwest, in those typical El Nino summer seasons, even into the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast U.S. Now, we'll see in a moment here. I kind of disagree with that along the Mid-Atlantic and Northeastern U.S. coastline because of those very warm sea surface temperature anomalies. I'm going to kind of go against climatology in the Mid-Atlantic region and even the Northeast U.S. for an El Nino season, and my outlook is for normal to maybe slightly above normal temperatures in this part of the nation, again, being influenced by those very warm sea surface temperatures over the western Atlantic Ocean. A lot of warmer than normal conditions in a typical El Nino year along the Pacific Northwest. Well, in terms of precipitation anomalies, generally wetter than normal conditions in the Mid-Atlantic region, the Northeast U.S. in those El Nino summers, and I do tend to agree with that. I am predicting wetter than normal conditions for the Mid-Atlantic region, for example, for the summer season. Also across the central plains as well, where cooler than normal conditions are generally the rule in an El Nino type of summer. Meanwhile, much of the western U.S. will experiencing a nice drying out period after the very, very stormy and wet winter season that we just have gone through, with California, for example, having some of the coldest, some of the snowiest winter weather in decades, maybe ever in some spots. Again, a pretty good drying out period over the summer season out across much of the western U.S. Well, this is kind of a summary paragraph for the summertime outlook in the Mid-Atlantic region. We also talk here about the summer season across the rest of the nation. One thing I want to point out in the Mid-Atlantic region, we've had very dry weather over the past couple of months. Soil conditions are quite low. It's certainly something I always take a look at this time of the year. Anytime you have very dry soil conditions going into the summer season, that is a worrisome feature because it enhances the chance for excessively hot summer kind of weather. Dry soil conditions often results in even is part of the reason why you can have excessively hot summer season weather. However, in this particular case, I think we had a soaking rainfall event in the Mid-Atlantic region during just this past weekend, and I think the overall weather pattern over the next several weeks will be much, much wetter. So by the time we get to the summer season, I think we'll be certainly back to normal in the Mid-Atlantic region in terms of soil moisture conditions. So all in all, normal to maybe slightly above normal temperatures for the summer season in the Mid-Atlantic region, and also somewhat wetter than normal conditions, which is rather typical of an El Nino summer in the Mid-Atlantic region. Elsewhere across the nation, cooler and wetter across much of the central and northern plains and Midwest. And the western U.S., again, looks like they'll experience a very nice drying out period after a very wet, stormy winter season. So again, El Nino, a big factor, will intensify over the next few months in the tropical part of the Pacific Ocean. At the same time, the Atlantic Basin will feature many areas with above normal sea surface temperatures. One is unfavorable for tropical activity in the Atlantic Basin, and the other is favorable. Bottom line might end up being somewhere in the middle with a nearly normal tropical Atlantic Basin tropical season for 2023. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.